Alright, so we did manage to show off Dick Duck, and now let's move on to the second game of the classic games lineup, Galaga. Now this might be very interesting because, stand up and fight for the galaxy. Fight off the Galaga with your spaceship. So, basically, directional pad is able to move around the spaceship, or use the analog stick for the classic controller, or, I'm assuming the missile button can be used from one or two buttons. Even then though, let's get this thing started. So just like in the forms of Dick Duck, this is actually my first time I've ever going to be experiencing Galaga. And from what I've heard, this game is actually very remarkable as well. But even then though, we'll get to that straight away as soon as we're able to get this thing started. Although first off, I need to point things out. Let me just go ahead and just adjust my settings quickly. In fact, I just hit the wrong button. And I can able to actually go ahead and just increase the size from here, from 14, just like before. And, probably, roughly about, oh, that was way too much, stretchiness involved. But I might go for 21 this time because, well, I just feel like it. So, anyways, let's get to it. So, once again, much like in the forms of, Dick Duck, you can also play this like either one-player or two-player mode. So, basically, this is how Galaga plays out. It's basically a top-down perspective, shoot 'em up. Even then though, as you expected from any other classic arcade games to be released. I don't know what this game did originally came out from, but, if I have to research on something really quickly, even though I'm also able to actually concentrate on this, because, just like in the forms of, Dick Duck, and especially noticeable for Pac-Man, where we get into tomorrow, that, once again, is going to be another endless, levels run through at this point in time, because, how the fact of the matter is, though, that's how arcade games usually just manage to able to do these days, even by the forms of, like, pretty much everything else for this was edible for the most part, though, so... Anyways though, so let's go ahead and just keep on shooting those enemies. Oh yeah, by the way, the main gimmick of this particular game is the fact that not only because of how the fact of the matter is though, is the fact that, you can able to actually just to kill, shoot all kinds of enemies, but in order to actually proceed... Excuse me, I'm really sorry about that. But, because I just drank way too much, and I'm doing too bad at this, because, well, I just, did not know it's to be expected to see how this will plays out a little, as far as it will be. So, anyway, though, as far as Galaga goes, I believe this game did originally came out in the forms of 1981, which is about, I would say, the exact same year as the release date of the forms of Donkey Kong from the arcade machines. So, naturally speaking, that this is the second Namco game to be ever solo released, so expecting that will be considered as much. Oh wow, you got an insane amount of hits from the actual enemies themselves. Sometimes in some of these stages, can actually lead you to the forms of the actual bonus stages themselves. So, just like before, I need to actually go after the high score. But again, I really can't do that on my first attempt, as you can see right there, because I automatically got myself my game over, and that's the only time you can able to die in this particular game, because much like in the forms of Dick Duck, and especially noticeable with Pac-Man, which again, we'll get to that tomorrow, basically, the how the fact of the matter is though, is that, if you're low on lives, then, you have to redo the entire thing again, even with your score count and all that stuff. And even though, just like in the forms of how, one thing I forgot to mention about this actually is the fact that, in between, let's just say all three of those classic arcade games, when you get from this particular package of Pac-Man Party for the Nintendo Wii or the 3DS, you can actually just manage to continue things when you're able to left off, even whenever it does have somewhat of a save system. Basically what that actually represents for is the fact that every time you die on the current level that you're in, you can able to actually continue where you left off after when you get yourselves a game over from. So, it might be a very ideal way. It's kind of like the same thing for how it does it in, in the forms of in Mario Party 7, but in forms of one of those minigames, Stick and Spin. So, yeah, it could be one of those potentials as far as that will go. And, again, that I haven't really experienced that much of Galaga up until now, because even then, I believe the only first time I've ever experienced the Galaga-based game, and that was the forms of one of those levels. It informs if in Space World, in Pac-Man World 1, at the very end of the forms of that world, you're able to actually fight against with the forms of the Galaga King himself, or something like that. Because that really inspires Galaga. So even then, though, that makes it purely obvious at this point. Wait a second, I think I've recognized this particular enemy over there. The one time there does have a little bit of a shark waves, or these waves sprites onto them. That was actually based off from the actual item of the Super Smash Bros. For the 3DS and Nintendo Wii U, and especially notable for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. They actually did bring up the actual, like, a Galaga item, which basically, if you get caught, I'm assuming if it correctly, you would able to actually just get yourselves a little bit more, well, you can't really get out of it, I don't think. So anyways, though, every once in a while in some stages, sometimes it gives you like a bonus stages or whatnot, because in fact, this game does remind me of the forms of the coin launcher mode in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, because even then, though, although the only noticeable difference is the fact that we don't literally use coins, so instead we just have to, like, you know, to deal with all kinds of, like, bullet shots and stuff like that. So, as you expected from any other levels at this point in time, things can get pure chaos around here, especially noticeable there's, like, too much stuff on screen, and plus you really need to be focusing on quite a few things, actually. So, especially noticeable if you really want to get yourselves your high score of this game, because the high score in Galaga is that we need to reach up to, like, 20,000 points. But if we don't reach it to 20,000 points, then, you know, you have to redo the entire process again. So even then, no, that's what usually happens in most of those games these days, even for, like, you know, just pretty, every game in general, so... Oh, Jesus. Oh, no! I've done it again! I really need to get a lot of practice with this. Can you really tell why this is actually the first time I've ever experienced Galaga for at least once or twice? But anyways, third time's a charm then. Even though it kind of feels the same thing for Dig Dug as well. But I will admit though right away though is that this one might be a little bit longer compared to the likes of Dig Dug at the moment, but it wasn't until when we get to the third and the final game of the classic games mode, which is the forms of Pac-Man obviously. That way we could able to actually just to move along for a little bit, or I don't know what I truly say that, but anyways, let's try that again, and I'm hoping I can able to get over 20,000 points, and if I do reach over 20,000 points, then I would get something rewarding in the forms of the rewards menu. So, yeah, that could be something out of it though. So, yeah, there's not much else I can really talk for this point, folks, ladies and gentlemen, because obviously that we've only just got like so little amount of content left before we're able to actually wrap things up with Pac-Man Party completely. And then as a result of that tradition, that how the fact that we've you know, almost done with the actual Let's Play of Pac-Man Party itself. So, even then though, expecting so, it might actually end and during at some point in, I won't say this weekend, but in the forms of sometime in Monday the 15th. So, even then though, that makes it a little bit obvious. So, anyways though, let's keep on shooting those enemies here, and in case if we do not even get one instant death from the forms of the enemies from the top and stuff like that. In fact, this game feels remarkably similar to Space Invaders, except the fact that that you do have a little bit more fluid controls and stuff like that. Well, usually I won't say that is because of how the fact that I haven't really I've heard about the Space Invaders game, but I haven't really played the actual Space Invaders game for my life. But even then, because I was more into the forms of Nintendo stuff and sometimes Sega stuff, so even then, because when I was like very, very young and all that stuff, then I'm still really into the forms of Nintendo and Sega stuff at this point right now, and especially noticeable by the forms of every series of games here and there as well. Alright, so how much heads do I've got this time around? So we've got 27. Okay, so there's a little bit of a middle side of the forms of, sorry, I hit the microphone, sorry about that. Anyways. Well, I must admit though right away, with the first and the second run-through of the forms of Galaga, I cannot believe Stage 4 did manage to able to kick my butt already from the start. But either way though, let's just go ahead and just continue on at this point. I'm hoping I can able to beat Stage 4 and try to even decide to able to get not only by the forms of like over 20,000 points, but also by the forms of just trying to bypass stage 4 before I move on to the next stage. So, and by the way, with these enemies right there, you have to hit them twice, because even then though, unlike the normal regular enemies, they simply been... Sorry, I just hit the microphone again. I really do apologize for this point right there, folks. Because basically, most of the small enemies, they are very simple and easy to able to defeat them, especially they only get hit by one and stuff like that. And as you can see, I've managed to grow myself my extra life. So even then though, I think this may actually be only happen if you manage to able to reach into like... Excuse me. If you manage to able to reach like the certain amount of points you can get, and every time you get even more points, then you would able to actually claim your extra life. So even then though that, if you really want to get your experience continue going, then by all means, and this stage is already gonna kick my butt because of that one enemy left, and hopefully I can take him down. There we go. Now we move on to stage 6, and hopefully the actual difficulty will start to rise up a little bit. Sometimes they're always trying to shoot out these projectiles sometimes, whilst other times though, they just simply decide to able to do a sidestepping formation. But even then though, very easy if you manage to able to actually just, well, just be very careful and just, you know, be more patient and all that stuff. Well, not so much so in patiency, but in forms of like just patience in general. And even especially noticeable how the fact that, and of course you really can't take your time because of how the fact that, well, if you get hit by the missiles, or in this case these projectiles, as you can see right there because of those. I will say though, those enemies can get pretty annoying to deal with sometimes, even by the forms of how the fact that they will never stay still most of the time, but I digress. So, challenging stage, so I'm presuming that might actually be, level 7. Hopefully I might as well get even more points as far as to this rate. So... And as you can see on the bottom right corner is the fact that every time you actually complete one of the levels, sometimes you're able to actually claim yourselves the forms of that special stamp. Or no, not so much for the stamp, but the badge of the forms of that, I would say for the level progression or something like that. So how much hits I've got? 25. So that was easily the lowest amount of hits I've ever got. Still the highest of the bunch, it was actually the 28 hits. So, there we go then. Now we'll move on to stage 8. And can I even make this with one life left? Well, we'll never know until whenever we're able to come across into the actual bullets. Or even just keep on ramming into enemies and stuff. And, oh my god, that was very, very close. Oh my lord. I'm a little bit nervous at this point. Oh, it's already over. Oh well, no big deal. But at least on the plus side though, we've actually managed to beat the high score of it, so... But there we go, 40,210 points. So, yeah, that's quite a lot of points that I've got. So anyways, let's go ahead and quit our game here. And as you expected, we got ourselves a name entry to do with right there. So, as usual, I'm gonna be putting, you know, KT... Oops, that was the wrong button. Anyway, KTE stands for Knuckles the Echidna, such as myself. Because, you know, by the forms of Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles, that, if you're playing as Knuckles the Echidna, then that's how the actual, like, extra life system will work. So anyways, that's, Galaga. Had a pretty enjoyable time of this, actually. So, yeah, but it can be very pure chaos of it sometimes, especially with enemies in here involved. But I digress. Do enjoy it. Now on to the third and the final game of the bunch.